Let's see. This is the 23rd and last video for War in the Pacific. Warplan's War in the Pacific. I'm not going to continue with the game anymore because it's too crappy, to tell you the truth. The designer, Mr. Sousa, understands virtually nothing about how carrier war was conducted in the Pacific. You can see my other earlier posts will give you all the reasons, but basically there are three reasons why this game is a very bad historical game. One is carrier operations are not realistic at all. All you have to do is pack a lot of inferior ships in your task force, and despite your having a carrier-to-carrier battle, those ships, like torpedo boats, will be targeted. You have no control over the targeting. And Mr. Sousa doesn't know anything about targeting, so you get the ridiculous outcome where you've got enemy carriers in the hex and you've got torpedo boats, and you take the torpedo boats under fire. And this happens more often with the Americans than the Japanese. So the Japanese will sink a carrier, but the Americans will sink a torpedo boat. That's how so it's totally nonsensical. And if you want an accurate historical battle, you're not going to get it. It's going to be nonsense. The second thing is amphibious operations, which are totally ridiculous because you can only invade with one division, whereas the Americans had a corps of three Marine divisions, and the Japanese can defend with a corps on an island, whereas they never had more than a division. So obviously you're never going to get the odds as the Americans, and you're never going to take the island. And what happens is you stay there for several turns protecting the Japanese, because once you've invaded the island, you cannot withdraw. And so you just sit there till you finally evaporate from running out of supplies, which is stupid beyond belief. And so I've tried on a number of occasions to take an island. You can't do it. It's just by accident that you get to take it. So, I mean, that's a serious weakness in the game, because it's basically, War in the Pacific is basically a carrier and an amphibious operation game, and those are the two weakest points of this game. I mean, they're not even realistic, and so you're not playing a historically realistic game. You're playing like Dungeons and Dragons or just some fool's game. And the third thing is, I guess Mr. Sousa read a couple books on the subject. He missed out where the Americans used the support forces to basically turn any anchorage into like a major port where they could reprovision and repair ships even. And they use those in their island hopping campaign, but you don't have that with this game. You have a game where you can't take the Japanese islands, so you've got to try to invade Japan about 100 hexes away. And of course that doesn't work. And then the last thing is that's part of keeping your carriers on the firing line. In this game, your carriers get ineffective in a couple turns, and then have to go back to their home port to recharge your batteries for about a half a dozen turns, which is nonsense. So you have one little operation and that's it, and you have to go back and nothing. Whereas the Americans kept their carriers at sea with their support forces almost continuously. Yeah, they had to go back and reprovision, but that didn't exhaust them so that their efficiency went down to 10%, which it did for me in this game. 10%. And I was out for like 2 turns. And in this game, if you move a long distance without touching down at a port, either coming from one or touching down at one, then your efficiency just goes down to crapper. So, I mean, there's nothing historical about this game in those regards. Otherwise, it's a nice game. He's got some nice ideas and nice rules, but he completely misses the nuts and bolts of a Pacific War game. Now, he developed a War in Europe game, and that's a pretty decent game. But there are a lot of people that developed War in Europe games, so I guess he got to get all those ideas and everything, and he could work with them. But there's not many games that are out there that are any decent for War in the Pacific, and so he didn't have a real good template, and it shows. I mean, his knowledge of War in the Pacific is very small. And I have a feeling it was that way for Europe, but you could compensate because you could look at a lot of different games and pick up a lot of stuff. Since he couldn't do that in War in the Pacific, it turned out the way it is. So there's no point to play it. I probably won't play it again unless there's some massive update. But I corresponded with him, and he just doesn't get it. I raised all of the points which he needed to address and told him the solutions. I gave him basically the rules changes, but when he responded back to me, it's like he never read it. It's like he started babbling about, oh, you can compensate by bombarding the islands. Well, see, if he knew anything about that, initially the Americans had some success in that, like at Tarawa and the first landing or two, because the Japanese set up their major defenses on the beach. But real soon they saw that they took horrendous casualties there, so they moved their defense to the mountains in caves and on the rear slopes of the mountains. And when the Americans bombarded, they couldn't do shit. It was all for theater. It wasn't, they weren't achieving much in the way of practical results. But see, Mr. Sousa thinks it was real effective. Well, it is. It wasn't. It was almost ineffective. So he structured the game that way, I guess. But it's stupid. If you knew anything about World War II, which apparently, or in the Pacific, which apparently he doesn't, you would know that. But so it's, I don't expect anything's going to happen with this. So it's just like one of those games I regret buying, in effect. But you never know until you play it out. So hopefully someone reads my reviews when they want to buy this and just don't bother with it. So anyway, it's sad, but we're shit canning it because it's no good. I only play historical games. I don't like fantasy games or yo-yo games. I mean, let somebody else. There's a bunch of yo-yos out there that think this game is really good. You can tell they're not very smart. Or they don't know much about World War II. They read as many books as Mr. Sousa, which is probably 2. And they're happy with everything the way it is. So piss on them. Anyway, so I'm currently, my plan, and I'm going back to it now, is to play one World War II game, one Napoleonic game, and one Civil War game at the same time. So I'm playing Chickamauga now. I'm playing, that's the Civil War one. I'm playing Napoleon's Waterloo campaign, the whole thing with all 4 battles, which was Quatre Bras, Lannes, Waterloo, and Wavre. And then I'm playing Battle of the Bulge, which was Hitler's 1944 Ardennes campaign. So those are the 3, and then as Ardennes is going to last a long time. As I finish that, I'll swap it out for another World War II, and with the Civil War for another Civil War, and I'll do it that way. I took this one as a fourth game because I thought, well, it looked pretty good and it'd be interesting, and I like War in the Pacific, but it turned out to be a real shitter. So anyway, that's it for this, and we'll hope for better. I'm always looking for another good game to play, and if I see one in the Pacific, I'll give it a try, and we'll see what happens.